The gunshot echoed across the valley, sending a flock of startled birds into the cloudless Arizona sky as Rebecca Dawson tumbled from her horse and felt the hard, unforgiving earth against her back. It wasn't supposed to end like this, not when she'd finally found a place to call home in the small town of Copper Creek. "Get her up," a gruff voice commanded. "And make sure she ain't dead. Worthless to us that way." Rebecca's vision swam as rough hands hauled her to her feet. The world tilted dangerously, a throbbing pain radiating from her temple where the butt of a pistol had struck her moments before. Through the haze, she counted 4 men trail-worn, dust-covered outlaws with eyes that promised nothing but cruelty. "Please," she managed, her throat parched from fear. "Whatever you want, shut her up," ordered the tallest of the bunch, a lean man with a face like weathered leather and a scar running from his left eye to his jaw. "Tie her hands. We ride east. Arizona Territory, 1879. Rebecca had come west just 6 months prior, leaving behind the suffocating confines of Boston society after her father's financial ruin and subsequent death. At 23, she'd secured a position as a schoolteacher in Copper Creek, finding unexpected joy in the simplicity of frontier life and the honest faces of her students. Now, as the outlaws bound her wrists with coarse rope and threw her across a saddle like a sack of grain, those simple joys seemed a lifetime away. "What do you want with me?" she demanded, fighting against the wave of nausea that threatened to overwhelm her. The scarred man yanked her head up by her auburn hair. "You're the schoolmarm who witnessed Decker getting shot. Judge needs a witness to hang the right man, and my employer needs the wrong man to hang." His breath was hot against her face. "So you're coming with us until after the trial. Then maybe we'll let you go." Maybe. Rebecca's blood ran cold. She had indeed witnessed the shooting 3 days ago, a dispute at the saloon that ended with the local blacksmith dead and a drifter named Carson blamed for the murder. But she knew the truth. Carson had acted in self-defense after the blacksmith drew first. "You're working for Thaddeus Warner," she stated, recalling the wealthy cattle baron who'd had a long-standing feud with the blacksmith over water rights. The man's eyes narrowed, and his hand connected with her cheek in a stinging slap. "Smart women end up dead women out here. Remember that." As they rode east into the desert, Rebecca fought to keep her wits about her. The gang traveled hard and fast, pushing their horses relentlessly as the Arizona landscape gradually transformed into the even more unforgiving terrain of the New Mexico Territory. They barely stopped, even as night fell, forcing Rebecca to stay awake through sheer terror and discomfort. By the second day, her lips were cracked and bleeding, her skin blistered from the sun. They gave her just enough water to keep her alive, dragging her through mesquite and cactus when she stumbled, laughing when thorns tore at her once fine dress. "How much farther?" asked the youngest of the gang, a boy barely older than some of Rebecca's students, though his eyes held none of their innocence. "2 more days to the hideout," replied the scarred man, whom the others called Vance. "We'll be safe there until the trial's over." Rebecca closed her eyes against despair. 2 more days of this torture might kill her. And even if it didn't, what awaited her at their destination promised little improvement. What she didn't know was that her absence had already been noted in Copper Creek. 40 miles behind them, Finn Eastwood tracked the gang's path with methodical precision. At 30 years old, Finn had spent the last decade of his life as a bounty hunter, a profession that had taught him patience above all else. Originally from Missouri, he'd fought briefly in the latter days of the Civil War before drifting west, finding that his skills with a rifle and reading terrain made him uniquely suited to tracking down those who wished not to be found. He'd arrived in Copper Creek just as news of Rebecca Dawson's abduction spread through town. Sheriff Mills had approached him immediately. "Eastwood, I've got 4 men who kidnapped our schoolteacher," the sheriff had said, desperation evident in his voice. "Warner's men, I'd stake my badge on it. They want to keep her from testifying at Carson's trial next week." Finn had been planning to continue north to Colorado, but something in the sheriff's description of Rebecca Dawson, her kindness to the town's children, the courage she'd shown in agreeing to testify despite threats stirred something in him. $500 if you bring her back alive," the sheriff had offered. "I don't need money to do what's right," Finn had replied, though in truth, he'd been running low on funds. "But I'll take it all the same." Now, As the sun began its descent on his second day of tracking, Finn knelt in the dust, examining the hoofprints that told a story clearer than words. For horses carrying riders, one bearing extra weight. They were pushing hard, but one horse was beginning to favor its right foreleg. They need to rest it soon or risk losing it entirely. "Don't worry, Miss Dawson," he murmured to the empty desert. "I'm coming." That night, as the gang made camp in a shallow arroyo, Rebecca fought against exhaustion. Her hands remained bound, though they'd loosened the rope around her ankles to allow her to walk to a nearby scrub bush for privacy. Vance kept his rifle trained on her the entire time. "Don't get any ideas," he warned. "Desert'll kill you quicker than we would." "Why work for Warner?" she asked, gathering courage as she was escorted back to the campfire. "Whatever he's paying you, it can't be worth hanging for kidnapping." Vance's companion, a red-haired man called Simmons, laughed. "Hanging's only if we get caught, schoolmarm. And out here, ain't nobody finding us." "Besides," added the third man, whose name she'd learned was Otis, "Warner owns half the territory judges. Even if we did get caught, we'd be out in a month." The youngest outlaw, Lucas, remained silent, staring into the fire. Rebecca had noticed his reluctance to participate in the rougher treatment she'd received. Perhaps there was still a conscience buried somewhere in the boy. When they offered her a strip of dried beef and a cup of water, she accepted gratefully, knowing she needed to maintain her strength. As the men settled in for the night, Vance took first watch, his eyes occasionally drifting to her in ways that made her skin crawl. "Try to sleep," he mocked. "Tomorrow's going to be even worse." Rebecca leaned against a rock, closing her eyes but remaining alert. She would find a way to escape. She had to. Miles behind them, Finn made his own cold camp without a fire, using the stars for navigation as he planned his approach. The gang's tracks suggested they were heading for the Badlands rough country, where a man could disappear for years if he knew the hiding places. He needed to intercept them before they reached that sanctuary. Dawn broke with merciless heat already building. The gang broke camp quickly, forcing Rebecca onto a horse despite her protesting muscles. As they rode, she noticed the terrain becoming increasingly barren, less scrub, more exposed rock and sand. The sun beat down like a physical weight, and her head pounded with dehydration. By midday, disaster struck. Otis's horse stepped into a prairie dog hole, snapping its leg with a sickening crack. The animal screamed in pain before Vance silenced it with a bullet. "Damn it all to hell," Vance snarled. "Now we're down a horse." "I'm not walking," Otis protested. "You'll ride double with Lucas," Vance decided. "But we'll need to slow down." This delay, Rebecca realized, might be her only chance. As they redistributed supplies, she twisted her wrists against the ropes, feeling them loosen slightly where her sweat had dampened the fibers. Not enough to slip free, but a start. They continued at a slower pace, tension building among the men as the delay threatened their schedule. When they stopped briefly at a stagnant water hole, Rebecca managed to work her bonds a fraction looser while pretending to adjust her skirts. Meanwhile, Finn had gained ground. The distinct track of a limping horse had told him the gang was having troubles, and when he found the carcass of the dead horse, he knew he was closing in. By his estimation, he was less than 2 hours behind them now. As the afternoon stretched on, Rebecca observed increasing discord among her captors. Otis and Simmons bickered constantly about the pace and direction, while Lucas grew even more withdrawn. Vance maintained control through intimidation, but she sensed the fragile nature of their alliance. When they stopped for water again, Rebecca seized her moment. "Lucas," she said softly when the young outlaw approached with her water ration, "you don't belong with these men." His eyes darted nervously to where the others were consulting over a tattered map. "Don't talk to me. You're what, 19? 20? Not yet too far gone to make a different choice." His hand trembled slightly as he passed her the canteen. "You don't understand. I can't just leave. Help me, then," she whispered urgently. "Loosen my ropes. I won't say it was you." For a moment, something like consideration crossed his features, but then Vance's shadow fell over them. "Getting friendly with the prisoner, Lucas?" The scarred man's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Remember, she's merchandise, not company." Rebecca flinched at being referred to as merchandise, but held Vance's gaze steadily. "I was just asking for more water." Vance yanked the canteen from her hands. "You'll get what we give you, when we give it." He turned to Lucas. "Get back to the horses. We're moving out." As dusk approached, they entered a narrow canyon where the walls rose high on either side, creating momentary shade that felt like a blessing after the relentless sun. Rebecca's hopes began to fade as she realized they were nearing their destination. Once they reached the hideout, her chances of escape would diminish considerably. What she didn't know was that Finn had gained even more ground during the afternoon. He'd abandoned caution for speed, recognizing from the tracks that they were heading for the labyrinthine canyons that marked the border between territories, a notorious hideout for outlaws of all stripes. When he spotted dust rising from beyond a ridge, he dismounted and proceeded on foot, rifle in hand. Cresting the rise, he surveyed the scene below. For riders moving slowly through a canyon, one of them clearly Rebecca from her clothing and the way she sat awkwardly on the horse with bound hands. Finn considered his options. 4 against 1 weren't favorable odds in a direct confrontation. He needed strategy, not brute force. The canyon provided an opportunity. If he could get ahead of them and find a defensible position, he might stand a chance. Moving quickly along the canyon rim, he sought a spot to intercept them. The fading light worked in his favor, casting long shadows that would make him harder to spot from below. In the canyon, Rebecca had nearly given up hope when she heard the distant but unmistakable sound of a rifle being cocked. The gang heard it too, heads snapping up in alarm. "Company," Vance hissed, drawing his pistol. "Spread out." The first shot rang out with deadly accuracy, striking Simmons in the shoulder and knocking him from his horse. The second kicked up dust at Vance's feet, causing his horse to rear in panic. "Take cover," Vance shouted, dragging Rebecca roughly from her horse and using her as a shield as he retreated behind a boulder. Lucas and Otis scrambled for protection, guns drawn but uncertain where to aim in the growing darkness. Simmons crawled behind a fallen log, clutching his bleeding shoulder and cursing vividly. "Whoever you are," Vance called out, "this woman dies if you don't back off." Rebecca felt the cold press of Vance's revolver against her temple, but refused to show fear. Something about the precision of those shots gave her hope this wasn't a random encounter with other outlaws. Someone had come for her. From above, a voice rang out clear and commanding. "Let her go, and you can ride away. My business is with the woman, not with you." Rebecca's heart leaped at the words. A rescuer, not another threat. "Show yourself," Vance demanded. "Not likely," came the reply. "You've got 3 seconds to release her. 1. You'll hit her if you shoot." Vance tightened his grip on Rebecca. 2. I mean it. I'll kill her. 3. The shot that came wasn't aimed at Vance, but at the rock just above his head. Fragments of stone rained down, causing him to flinch and loosen his hold just enough. Rebecca seized the moment, driving her elbow hard into his stomach and twisting away. Chaos erupted. More shots rang out from above, precise and controlled, keeping the gang pinned down. Rebecca scrambled behind a different boulder, her bound hands hampering her movements, but adrenaline giving her strength. "Miss Dawson," the voice called. "When I fire again, run to your right. There's a path up the canyon wall." She tensed, ready. When the next shot rang out, she bolted, half running, half stumbling toward where the canyon wall seemed less steep. Behind her, she heard Vance's enraged shout and the sound of pursuit. Then another figure was there, sliding down the canyon wall with controlled speed, landing between her and Vance. Through the dust and dimming light, Rebecca saw a tall man with a weathered face and determined eyes, revolver aimed steadily at her pursuer. "That's far enough," he said calmly. Vance froze, calculating his odds. "Who the hell are you?" "Name's Finn Eastwood. Sheriff Mills sends his regards." Vance's eyes narrowed. "The bounty hunter. Should have known." "Drop your weapon," Finn commanded. For a tense moment, Rebecca thought Vance might risk a shot. Instead, he slowly lowered his gun to the ground. "This isn't over." "For tonight, it is," Finn replied, not lowering his own weapon. "Now call off your men." Vance hesitated, then shouted, "Stand down, boys. We'll settle this another day." Finn quickly moved to Rebecca's side, keeping his gun trained on Vance. "Are you hurt, Miss Dawson?" "Nothing serious," she managed, though her entire body ached from the ordeal. "How did you find me?" "I'll explain later. Right now, we need to move." With his free hand, he worked at the ropes binding her wrists, finally freeing her chafed skin. As he guided her toward where he'd left his horse, Rebecca glanced back to see Vance watching them with murderous intent. "They won't give up," she warned. "I'm counting on it," Finn replied grimly. Easier to bring them all in at once. They reached his horse, and he helped her mount before swinging up behind her. "Hold tight," he instructed. "We're going to ride hard until we find a defensible position for the night." As they rode away from the canyon, Rebecca felt both relief and trepidation. She'd escaped her captors, but they were still deep in hostile territory with vengeful outlaws likely to pursue them. "Thank you," she said as they crested a rise, the vast desert spreading before them under a sky now filled with stars. "You risked your life for a stranger." "Sheriff said you're worth saving," Finn replied, his voice softer than before. "Said you were brave, standing up to Warner like that." "Not brave," she corrected. "Just unable to let an innocent man hang for something he didn't do." Finn's respect for her grew in that moment. Most people in frontier towns minded their own business, especially when powerful men like Warner were involved. This schoolteacher had more courage than many gunfighters he'd known. They rode for another hour before Finn found what he was looking for: a small plateau with good visibility in all directions and a sheltered overhang that would conceal a small fire. As they dismounted, Rebecca nearly collapsed, the exhaustion of the past days finally catching up with her. Finn caught her by the arm. "Easy now. Let's get you settled." He worked efficiently, unsaddling his horse and setting up a minimal camp. When he struck a match to light a small, well-shielded fire, Rebecca nearly wept at the warmth it promised. He offered her his canteen and some jerky from his saddlebags. "It's not much," he apologized, "but it'll keep your strength up." "It's a feast compared to what I've had," she replied gratefully, accepting both. As she drank, she studied her rescuer in the firelight. Tall and lean, with eyes that seemed to miss nothing, he moved with the quiet confidence of a man accustomed to dangerous situations. "How far are we from Copper Creek?" she asked after satisfying her immediate thirst. 3 days' ride, at least," Finn replied, checking his rifle before setting it within easy reach. "We'll have to be careful. Vance and his men know these territories better than I do. They said they work for Thaddeus Warner," Rebecca explained. "He's trying to stop me from testifying that Carson acted in self-defense." Finn nodded. Sheriff figured as much. Warner's been buying up half the county. He can't afford to have his reputation damaged by being connected to a murder. "The trial is in 4 days," Rebecca said worriedly. "If I'm not there, you'll be there," Finn assured her. "I gave my word to Sheriff Mills, and I don't break my promises." Something in his tone made Rebecca believe him absolutely. Despite their precarious situation, she felt safer than she had in days. "You should rest," he suggested, draping his spare blanket over her shoulders. "I'll keep watch." Too exhausted to argue, Rebecca curled up near the fire, the blanket smelling of horses and leather and wood smoke scents that had become synonymous with the frontier life she'd embraced. Despite her best intentions to stay alert, sleep claimed her almost immediately. Finn watched her for a moment, struck by the peaceful expression that softened her features in sleep. Beneath the dust and exhaustion, he could see the beauty that had probably turned heads back east before she'd chosen this harder life. More importantly, he recognized the inner strength that had kept her alive and defiant through her ordeal. The night passed quietly, Finn allowing himself only brief periods of rest while maintaining vigilance. By dawn, he'd developed a plan to evade pursuit while making their way back to Copper Creek. Rebecca awoke to the smell of coffee, sitting up to find Finn tending a small fire where a battered pot simmered. "You had coffee in your saddlebags?" she asked incredulously. He offered a rare smile. "Some luxuries are worth the extra weight." The warmth of that smile transformed his face, softening the hard edges earned from years of tracking dangerous men across unforgiving terrain. Rebecca found herself smiling back, a moment of normalcy in their abnormal circumstances. As they shared the coffee and the last of his provisions, Finn outlined his plan. "We'll head northwest instead of directly west. It's longer, but we'll have better water sources, and they'll expect us to take the direct route back to town. What if they split up to cover more ground? Then we'll deal with them in smaller groups," he replied with simple confidence. "Either way, my priority is getting you back safely." They set out as the sun crested the horizon, sharing Finn's horse to preserve its strength. Rebecca sat in front, acutely aware of Finn's solid presence behind her, his arms reaching around to hold the reins. Despite the danger they faced, she found herself drawing comfort from his nearness. By midday, they'd covered significant ground, stopping briefly at a spring Finn knew from previous travels through the area. As Rebecca refilled their canteens, she noticed him scanning the horizon with a focused intensity. "You see something?" she asked, suddenly alert. "Not yet," he replied. "But Vance strikes me as a man who doesn't give up easily. We're being followed, just a question of how close they are." They continued their journey, the landscape gradually shifting from barren desert to scattered vegetation as they gained elevation. Finn remained vigilant, occasionally adjusting their route based on signs only he could read in the terrain. Late in the afternoon, his caution proved warranted when he spotted dust rising in the distance behind them. "Riders," he confirmed grimly. "At least 2, maybe 3. They found our trail," Rebecca concluded, her heart sinking. "Yes, but we have an advantage." He pointed ahead to where the land rose into rugged foothills. "I know a place up there, an old mining cabin. Defensible, with a good view of the approaches." They pushed harder, their horse laboring up the increasingly steep terrain. The sun was beginning to set when they reached the abandoned cabin. Finn had mentioned, a simple one-room structure of rough-hewn logs, its roof partially collapsed, but walls still sturdy. "It's not much," Finn acknowledged as he helped Rebecca dismount, "but it's better than being caught in the open." He led the horse to a small corral behind the cabin where remnants of a water trough still stood, then quickly gathered what firewood he could find. "Should we risk a fire?" Rebecca asked, eyeing the darkening sky where storm clouds were gathering. "Yes," Finn decided. "Rain's coming. Fire smoke will be less visible, and we'll need the warmth." Inside, the cabin was dusty but intact enough to provide shelter. A simple wooden table, a chair with a broken back, and a narrow cot with a rotted mattress constituted the only furniture. Finn cleared debris from the stone fireplace, and soon had a small fire burning. As darkness fell completely, the first raindrops began to patter on the remaining sections of roof. Rebecca sat near the fire, watching Finn check his weapons with methodical precision. "How long have you been a bounty hunter?" she asked, breaking the companionable silence that had developed between them. 10 years, give or take," he replied, not looking up from his task. "Started after the war. Seemed like a way to use what skills I had. It's a dangerous life." Now he did look up, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Says the schoolteacher who stood up to the most powerful man in the county and then survived being dragged across the desert by outlaws." Rebecca laughed softly, surprising herself. "I suppose we all have our own kinds of courage." "Yours is the rarer kind," Finn said, his voice sincere. "Standing for what's right when it would be easier to look away, that's something special." The compliment warmed her more than the fire. "What will you do after you get me back to Copper Creek?" Finn considered the question. "Move on, I suppose. There's always someone who needs finding. A solitary life. It suits me." But even as he said it, Finn wondered if that was still true. The past 2 days with Rebecca had awakened something he'd long suppressed, a longing for connection, for purpose beyond the next bounty. The rain intensified, drumming on the roof and hissing when drops found their way down the chimney to the fire. Outside, thunder rolled across the hills. Rebecca shivered, not entirely from cold. "They're still coming, aren't they?" she asked quietly. Finn nodded. "The rain will slow them down, but yes. Vance has too much at stake to give up. I'm sorry to have involved you in this danger." "Don't be," he replied firmly. "Some things are worth the risk." Their eyes met across the fire, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition of shared values that transcended their different backgrounds and experiences. In that moment, Rebecca saw beyond the bounty hunter to the man beneath, principled, capable, and unexpectedly gentle despite his dangerous profession. The storm raged through the night, but inside the cabin, a different kind of storm was brewing, one of confused emotions and unexpected attraction. As they conversed about their lives and experiences, Rebecca found herself drawn to Finn's quiet strength and clear moral compass, while he marveled at her resilience and compassionate intelligence. When fatigue finally overcame them, Finn insisted Rebecca take the cot, while he kept watch from the chair, rifle across his lap. Despite her protests that they should take turns, he was adamant. "I've slept in worse conditions," he assured her. "Rest while you can." The rain continued through the night, turning the ground outside to mud, a circumstance Finn noted would work in their favor by slowing pursuit. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving behind a washed, clean world glistening in the early light. They set out again after a meager breakfast of the last of their provisions. The muddy conditions made travel difficult, but Finn's knowledge of the territory allowed them to make steady progress toward Copper Creek. Throughout the day, he remained alert for signs of pursuit, though the rain had obscured most tracks. By late afternoon, they reached a small trading post where Finn was known to the proprietor, an aging former trapper named Jenkins. The man greeted them with curiosity, but asked no questions when Finn requested supplies and mentioned they were in a hurry. "Heard some interesting news this morning," Jenkins commented as he gathered the items Finn had requested. "Seems the territorial marshal arrested Thaddeus Warner yesterday. Something about conspiracy and obstruction of justice." Rebecca and Finn exchanged startled glances. "What happened?" Finn asked. "Story goes that one of Warner's men got caught drunk in Silver Springs and started talking too much about a kidnapping job gone wrong." Jenkins shrugged. Marshall put the pieces together quick enough. This news changed everything. If Warner had been arrested, his hold over Vance and the others would be significantly weakened. They might even abandon their pursuit to save themselves. Armed with fresh supplies and renewed hope, they continued their journey. That night, they camped in a sheltered grove near a stream, both more relaxed than they had been since their escape. As they sat by the fire, Rebecca finally asked the question that had been on her mind. "What happens after? When we get back to Copper Creek and I testify?" Finn was silent for a long moment. "I hadn't thought that far ahead," he admitted finally. "Usually, I deliver whoever I'm tracking and move on to the next job. And now," he looked at her across the fire, something vulnerable in his expression. "Now I'm not so sure that's what I want." Rebecca's heart quickened at his words. "What do you want, Finn Eastwood?" "Maybe." He began hesitantly. "Maybe something I never thought I'd find out here. A reason to stop running." The tension between them had been building since that first night in the abandoned cabin, a connection neither had expected, but both increasingly recognized. Now, with danger potentially receding and their journey nearing its end, they faced the question of what might come after. Rebecca moved to sit beside him, their shoulders touching. "I came west looking for a new beginning," she said softly. "I found it in teaching, in becoming part of a community that values honesty and hard work above social standing." "You found your place," Finn observed. "Yes." She turned to meet his gaze directly. "Perhaps there's room in that place for someone else who values those same things." The invitation in her words was unmistakable. Finn reached out slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. The simple contact sent warmth spreading through both of them. "I've never stayed anywhere for long," he confessed. "Never had a reason compelling enough." "And now?" Rebecca asked again, her voice barely above a whisper. Instead of answering with words, Finn leaned forward and kissed her gently at first, then with growing certainty as she responded. When they finally parted, both were breathing quickly, surprised by the intensity of feeling between them. "I think," Finn said with a smile that transformed his features, "that Copper Creek might be worth staying around for a while." The final day of their journey passed without incident, suggesting that news of Warner's arrest had indeed caused their pursuers to abandon the chase. As they crested the last ridge and saw Copper Creek spread out in the valley below, Rebecca felt a surge of emotion, relief at returning safely, pride at knowing she would still be able to testify, and a new, tender feeling when she glanced at the man beside her. Their arrival in town caused a sensation. Sheriff Mills rushed out to meet them, his weathered face breaking into a rare smile when he saw Rebecca safe. "Miss Dawson, thank the Lord," he exclaimed. "And Eastwood never doubted you for a minute." As townsfolk gathered around them, news and explanations flowed freely. Warner's arrest had indeed been the talk of the territory, and with his influence removed, the upcoming trial was likely to proceed fairly. Carson would have his chance at justice, with Rebecca's testimony a crucial element. That evening, after Rebecca had bathed and changed into clean clothes provided by the kind wife of the town doctor, she sat with Finn on the porch of the boarding house where she lived. Sheriff offered me a deputy position, Finn mentioned casually. Says the town could use a man with my experience. Rebecca's heart leaped, but she kept her voice measured. And what did you tell him? Said I'd think about it. Finn turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the sunset. Told him I needed to discuss it with someone whose opinion matters to me. Is that so? She replied, unable to suppress her smile. And whose opinion would that be? A certain schoolteacher who's shown more courage in a week than most men show in a lifetime. He took her hand, his touch gentle yet sure. A woman I'd like to know better, if she's willing. Rebecca interlaced her fingers with his. She's very willing, she assured him. Though she should warn you that taking up with the local schoolmarm comes with certain expectations of respectability. Finn laughed, the sound rich and genuine. I suppose a bounty hunter settling down as a deputy is respectable enough? It's a start, she agreed, leaning against his shoulder. 1 year later, the schoolhouse of Copper Creek gained an extension, a small but comfortable house for the teacher and her new husband, the town's deputy. Their wedding, attended by nearly everyone in the county, became legendary not just for the story of how they met, but for the 4 unexpected guests who arrived under guard. Vance and his gang, captured by Finn 2 months after the trial when they unwisely attempted to rob a stage near Silver Springs. Rebecca Eastwood continued teaching the children of Copper Creek for many years, while Finn found unexpected satisfaction in helping Sheriff Mills maintain peace in the growing town. Their home became known as a place of warmth and justice, where anyone in trouble could find a fair hearing and, if deserved, a helping hand. And on quiet evenings, they would sometimes sit on their porch watching the sunset over the distant desert, the same desert that had first brought them together in circumstances neither could have imagined would lead to such happiness.